TIL. During World War II, the American military went from 2,500 planes to over 300,000 aircraft used by the end of the war. My father flew the General Motors version of Grumman's Wildcat, the FM2. He loved the nimble and trusty fighter, referring to it variously as his Bumblebee and his Maytag Messerschmitt, the latter a reference to its coming from an automobile company and also that it sounded like a washing machine, very distinct from the Grumman F4F, according to Dad. It was a very reliable airplane and well suited to the small aircraft carriers from which he operated. I was reading an anecdote that one of Germany's aircraft engineers got a hold of a PW engine from a bomber that got shot down. The engine was so finely and precisely built that it didn't need proper engine seals to not leak oil. And this was an engine that was flying over their heads by the thousands every day. He knew that Germany couldn't build an engine that perfect, or in that quantity. He said that he knew the war was lost then. If people aren't familiar with some of the raids during World War II, they should look at some of the footage. There were times when the US sent up 1,000 bombers. I'm an aviation nerd, so I know a bit about these things. What I've never been able to imagine is what that might have looked at flying overhead. AB-17 is a 4-engine heavy bomber that is loud as hell. I figure 900 or so might be one of the most impressive things you could have ever seen. If you'd like to learn more about how American logistics won World War II, read Atkinson's trilogy. He is a great journalist since for ferreting out the often overlooked facts and figures about the sheer weight of American industrial production during the war. He is a fantastic description of how a literal army of US clerks and bean counters descended on an occupied Paris after liberation. You should see The War by Ken Burns. It will tell you everything you need to know about America and World War II, and in my opinion why Europeans, I'm one myself, should hold a gratitude towards a generation that actually went through with it. And before USA only did it to control world economy, make the petrodollar, blah blah, the fucking Nazis were about to control Europe. That's what's up. The US has already mastered industrial scale factories within the car industry and other sectors, which were converted into manufacturing military equipment. The Japanese production capacity consisted of thousands of locally distributed machine shops, often within people's homes, to make parts that would then be assembled elsewhere. And due to the rush production and outdated aeronautic engineering knowledge, a lot of these planes have really bad design flaws which contributed to a significant amount of accidents. Early B-29s, for example, have a tendency to spontaneously caught on fire due to the poor cooling design of the Radar 3350 duplex Cyclone engines. As with UK, tank tech was poor and late. Aircraft industry far better than Axis. Huge resources went into strategic bombers. With hindsight, we should have just copied the T-34-85. However, the Sherman was produced in large numbers and overwhelmed the enemy in the end. Until 1941. The leadership among the Axis powers thought that the US had no stomach for war. The Americans, of all people. The Axis made a lot of stupid decisions, but poking and jabbing at the United States is certainly up there as one of the dumbest. It had really interesting repercussions after the war, as for long-time pilots were easy to come by for airlines, and the production lines were able to produce civilian aircraft very efficiently once they switched from war production. There's an old story about US production in World War II. Americans capture a German tank commander. They say, "Hey Fritz, I thought one of yours was better than 10 of ours." "Ja, that's correct." "Then why did you surrender?" "You had 11. Imagine if this sort of all-out effort was directed to construction of modern nuclear power stations worldwide. In the big scheme of things, World War II may have been less of a threat to human societies than the current climate disaster. We bombed out cities to free people supposedly being kept in concentration camps, yet we are still the good guys. We stooped to executing prisoners of war as seen in Band of Brothers. How exactly were we better than the Germans? I think I remember learning they sold many of those aircraft as surplus, so after the end of World War II, you could buy some pretty nice airplanes for next to nothing. I wonder if they removed the guns from them before selling them. Keeping it simple, there were 205 planes built per day for 4 years, give or take. With some of that time used for design and logistics, the daily output would have been even higher. Almost inconceivable. I don't think there's ever been another time in US history when the entire nation was dedicated to the war effort. Imagine if we could mobilize the entire US industry to fight climate change. And today it seems that most European air forces can't afford more than maybe 100-200. Admittedly, modern jets are far more complex and expensive, but it is a somewhat pitiful display. The rapid expansion of aircraft meant the need for a rapid expansion of airmen, most young and experienced. As a result, over 25,000 airmen died in training accidents during World War II, and most of it was due to one Disney movie called Victory Through Air Power, which helped explain to the public huge expenses for such development and garner support for it. The fleet was used to spray the southern portion of the nation with DDT in a years-long campaign to eliminate malaria and a yellow fever from the country. Interesting stuff, and the massive industry created has been bleeding the country dry ever since, demanding more and more monies, until every US citizen is born with $93,000 in debt. American was fortunate to have voted in the greatest wartime and peacetime president in its history, FDR. Starting from Kennedy and on its spin used car salesmen, today America is still a manufacturing powerhouse. We just manufacture very high-end things like medical equipment and fighter jets, not day-to-day items. The US Army in 1939 was less than 190,000. At the end of the war it was over 8.3 million. The Navy went from 125,000 to 3.3 million. America won on its economy and its resolve. The country woke the hell up and went into an overdrive like the world has never seen. This would help explain why the US decided arms and weapons export and therefore war are the most profitable business around. I remember reading somewhere, at its peak the US made more planes alone in 1 year than Japan made during the entire war. When my father was drafted there was still a cavalry unit at his training base. 2 years later they had atomic bombs. That's literally why they wanted to join. The planes weren't free and made people a lot of money. By the end of the war the US had more airplanes than the combined air forces of all the war participants. Once you stop making automobiles and turn that production capacity to making aircraft, it's not that hard. My wife waited until I got back from France to put an IKEA dresser together. We're past our prime SMHS. Wow, they even fully converted from using planes to using aircraft by the end of the war. That's insane. Weapons manufacturers were the richest people that preferred to be away from rich list or limelight. That will never be possible again. At the very least the US has lost its manufacturing might. Hitler thought we wouldn't be able to sufficiently mobilize until the 70s. He was very wrong. The US was that lucky player in StarCraft that spawned alone and could mass battlecruisers. The mobilization and logistics involved with World War II is always mind-boggling to me. More planes were destroyed in World War II than all that simply exists globally today. You can thank the Willow Run Airport for some of those contributions. It does not mean that you're gay, it just means that you have a price. Shout out to Rosie the Riveter and all the women that got it done. An armada that could block out the Sun Sam seaboard. West Wing. Finally a good TIL and not about someone being a groomer. In total over 800,000 aircrafts were produced during World War II. Control-C Control-V. Repeat every few minutes for 4 years.